So many people have woken up in the last, 4 or 5 years. 2020 was sort of a breaking point where people could see how much we're being lied to and started to ask the question, why? And people who never before could see the spiritual battle between good and evil could suddenly see it because evil was more obvious. The thing is that we're conditioned not to see it. And I think a lot of men, more so than women, could see it. They are faced with more injustice by a lot. They don't have the privilege, right? They're told that they do, but they don't. And they are dealing with an impossible dating situation, family court, all the rest of it. If we had been raised with fairy tales, for example, it would have warned men. And it would have instructed women. It would have instructed men too, but it would have warned men and instructed women for the most part. So on Sundays, we go back and we investigate what we used to know and what they don't want us to know in this day and age. Hi, welcome back to Far From Eden. Today is Sunday, the day that we read fairy tales. And for some people, it sounds insane. And I get it. It was something that we kind of found accidentally. By we, I mean myself and the subscribers, many of whom have been here since when I was propping my phone up on like pillows and stuff and using a lamp and no microphone. And we kind of accidentally found all this truth and all these warnings that men didn't get growing up. And you might think, well, people just didn't want to read them anymore. No. These Grimm Brothers fairy tales were published in 1812 and 1815. And they were republished in the 20th century with very important details removed. And then Disney decided to reinvent the fairy tale and make it completely about something else, and no one was the wiser. And that was on purpose. That was intentional. So today we have Old Sultan, and I don't read these ahead of time so we can experience them together, but I have seen the first sentence and I'm already bracing myself just on a personal level. Old Sultan. A farmer had a faithful dog named Sultan. That's where I got nervous because I'm like, oh no, we have learned in these fairy tales that really bad stuff happens. And these are not like harmless things that you just read to little children. No, these are instructional. These are to keep a culture. A farmer had a faithful dog named Sultan. He was old and couldn't latch onto things with his teeth anymore. So the farmer said to his wife, I'm going to ventilate Old Sultan. He's no longer of use to us anymore. His wife replied, don't do it. We should support the faithful dog in his old age. He served us well so many years. That is not how a lot of wives see their husbands if he should fall ill or become disabled. I just need to point that out, that if you are reading this to little girls, it would be instructing them on loyalty. You guys understand why that would be important, and that you're like, oh, I don't think they had that lesson. You must be out of your mind, her husband said. What are we going to do with him? He doesn't have a tooth left in his head. No thief would be afraid of him anymore. If he served us well, he's done it because of his hunger. And because he was well fed here. Tomorrow is his last day. End of discussion. The dog had overheard everything that they had discussed. Since he had a good friend, the wolf, he went out to see him in the evening and whine about his fate and tell him that his master was going to ventilate him the next day. "Don't worry," the wolf said. "I'm going to give you a good plan. Early tomorrow morning, your master will be going out with his wife to make hay, and they'll take their little child with them because nobody will be staying at home." Again, the wife is helping out in the field with the hay, not soft life, and the child is going with them because you don't just leave your child to a stranger and there isn't going to be a family member. I get it. These are things that you would have understood to be true and right if they had been shaping you as you were growing up, these tales. And if you had parents that were reading them to you and imparting this knowledge. They generally lay the child behind the hedge while they work. Now you're to lie down next to the child as if you want to rest and guard him. I'll come out of the forest and steal the child. Then you've got to jump up and run after me and chase me away. They'll believe that you rescued their child and you'll be in their good graces. And they'll give you anything you want for the rest of your life. The dog liked the plan, and it was carried out just as they had conceived it. The wolf ran off a short distance, and when the dog overtook him, the wolf dropped the child, and the dog brought him back to his master. Whereupon the man cried out in a very loud voice, "Well, since our old Sultan has chased away the wolf once again, he's going to stay alive and will support him for the rest of his life. Wife, go home and cook him some bread mush that he can easily swallow. Also, bring him my pillow. He's to have it for his bed as long as he lives." I mean, they should have done that earlier because clearly he'd already done it. Anyways, all of a sudden, old Sultan had it so good that he couldn't have wished for a better life. The wolf came to him and was delighted to learn that everything had succeeded so well. "Now you certainly won't have anything against it and will help me when I steal a fat sheep from your master." Uh-oh. Uh-oh. He trusted the wolf. Maybe that wasn't such a good idea. But Sultan was loyal to his master and told him what the wolf had in mind. So the man waited for the wolf in the barn. And when the wolf came and wanted to get a good bite of sheep, the farmer practically skinned him alive. Later, the wolf was so outraged. Oh, so he survived. Okay. Later, the wolf was so outraged that he scolded old Sultan, called him a miserable fellow, and challenged him to a duel to settle things. You can't split your loyalty, right? You just can't split your loyalty. They were to take their positions right outside the forest, and each one was to bring a second with him. The wolf was the first one at the place and had brought the wild boar as his second. The old Sultan had only been able to recruit a lame cat. And finally set out with her. When the wolf and the boar saw the cat coming toward them, constantly limping, they thought that she was picking up stones to throw at them, and they both became frightened. So the wild boar crawled into some bushes, and the wolf jumped up a tree. When the dog and cat reached the spot, they were both puzzled to find nobody there. However, the boar in the bushes began twitching his ear, and when the cat saw something move, she sprang on top of the boar and bit and scratched him. Consequently, the boar leaped into the air with a loud cry and ran away. As he was running, he yelled out, "Your opponent's sitting up there in the tree." Oh no. Well, that's not very loyal, is it? So it came to light that the wolf had cowardly retreated. And the only way he could climb down from the tree was by agreeing to a peaceful settlement. The dog was loyal to the master, and the wolf didn't talk about there being a catch, right? I think it's a good lesson for the dog that he should have known there was a good catch, but in the end, good one out. Good one out in the day. The loyalty that the dog had to the master was rewarded. Loyalty was rewarded. And as I said in the beginning of the tale, we have some people in our society who are not showing loyalty to men. They'll just break off a marriage when there are children because they're not happy. Like, there should be something that overrides that. Like character, just a little bit. But these women seem to think that when they feel a certain way, they can be free to do whatever they want to. And that's wrong. I mean, I feel like I'm saying something so simple because at the end of the day, it is simple. Media and all the rest of the propaganda tries to convince us it's so complicated. But you know what? Right is right and wrong is wrong. And loyalty is right. I mean, and I know that a lot of men understand this. I think it's easier for men to understand. And I'm saying that because of my eyeballs and what I can see happening. It's clear that men will stay in a relationship, for example, for the children. The things they will have to endure. I think that was my dad, honestly. And I know that was my dad. I know it was my dad. I think that was a big sacrifice. And I know that it wasn't for him. So, do I have a bias? Yeah, but I didn't start with one. I'm biased towards the truth. And some people will say that it's wrong to say the things I say. And I have to be so careful and constantly YouTube is like, well, this video can only be partially monetized. And I'm like, what in the world did I say? And it just is so telling the things that they say are offensive. You can't say that. I'm like, yeah, it challenges the overall narrative. And isn't it funny? It's narrative. That's a story. They're telling you a story. They, the overlords, are telling you a story. And they want to hide other stories from you. And it's to the detriment greatly to men and society as a whole. It is great for the hedonists. I mean, not in the hereafter, but that's their decision. We all have free will. The next one is the 6 swans. A king went hunting in a vast forest, got lost, and couldn't find his way out. Finally, he came upon a witch. Well, so many witches in these tales. I wonder why. I wonder what they were trying to warn us all about. There's not a lot of warlocks, which would be the male version. That's weird. Hope you sense my sarcasm. Sorry, I freak out when there was a witch. All right, so finally he came upon a witch and asked her to show him the way out of the forest. However, the witch told him she wouldn't do it. He had to remain there and would lose his life. He could only be saved if he married her daughter. Great. The king cherished his life, and he was so frightened, he said yes. So the witch brought the maiden to him. Though she was young and beautiful, he couldn't look at her without getting the creeps and secretly shuddering. Interesting. She was young and beautiful, but he got the creeps. This is the first time that I can remember in any of the tales that we've read so far that beauty didn't go hand in hand with piousness, goodness, and all those characteristics. Usually in these fairy tales, they go hand in hand because back then the person wouldn't be beautiful at all if they had a bad character. That's a huge lesson that's been driven home. So I think we should all take note that here we have the daughter of a witch who's young and beautiful, but he's still getting the creeps. So he's still uneasy about this young, beautiful woman. And I think in this day and age, well, men should be wary of all women, but especially if they're beautiful, sometimes men look past a lot of things. And that's where they tend to get into trouble because men will look at a beautiful woman. And this is proven in psychology. Like if people see somebody and they're attractive, they automatically in their mind project and assign positive characteristics to that person. Like they're honest, they're all the good things that a person would be when they see an attractive person. So I think that is exaggerated even when a man looks at a beautiful woman, he's going to assign these good things to her, especially if she's pretending, which they do. And that is a warning. I think men, when they see a beautiful woman, they need to immediately take pause because they should know that it's too easy to be fooled by this beautiful woman. So, yeah, I think beware of all of them, but especially when you see a beautiful one smiling at you, be like, you know what I mean? Because it's just too tempting. Too tempting to believe good things about her character just because of the way that she looks and the way that she's acting. You need to see actions because we're good at acting and making you think that we take certain good actions, like being loyal, as we read about in the first tale. Oh boy, this one is full of all kinds of gems that we're digging up. So he would shudder. However, he intended to keep his promise. Then the old woman led both of them on the right path out of the forest. And once they were at the king's home, the witch's daughter became his wife. Now the king still had 7 children from his first wife, 6 boys and a girl. And since he was afraid the stepmother might harm them, he brought them to a castle in the middle of a forest. Man, every time, look, it's a witch and a stepmother. Look, that is a theme. So many themes are the stepmother is also a witch, like in Hansel and Gretel, and we all know what the witch did there. So he's so afraid that she's going to do something to them, and he moves them to a whole different castle, and it's in the middle of the forest. Why does the stepmom, the next wife, why She gets precedent over the children, and that should not be the case. Should not be the case. If that's the case, then he shouldn't marry her. Anyways, it's a common theme. It's a common warning. This is warning. These are all warnings and instructions. Oh, it lay so well concealed, nobody knew the way to it, and he himself would not have found it if a wise woman had not given him a ball of yarn. When he threw the ball before him, the yarn unwound itself and showed him the way. Since the king loved his children very much, he frequently went to the castle. However, the queen became curious and wanted to know why he was going out into the forest all alone. Where are you going? What are you doing? Where are you going? None of your business, woman. She interrogated the servants, and they revealed the entire secret. The first thing she did was to use her cunning and acquire the ball of yarn. Then she took 7 small shirts and went out into the forest. The ball of yarn showed her the way, and when the 6 little princes saw her coming from the distance, they were delighted because they thought their father was coming and ran out to her. But all at once, she threw a shirt over each one of them, and as soon as they were touched by the shirts, they were turned into swans and flew away over the forest. She's a witch. She's a witch too. Of course she is. She's a witch stepmother. Why are you going to turn them into swans? They're not hurting you. Your husband goes out and visits them, doesn't involve you, doesn't take anything away from you. Does this sound familiar? Oh yeah, my wife is going to sabotage the things I enjoy. Take over them. Why? Did you have a separate single life that all of a sudden you're married and you're like, oh, I don't go do that anymore? And it's just because she's demanding you don't, or that you do something with her. So now you don't have your private space. Men's spaces, where did they go? You're like, allowed to watch football. What else? But nobody's stopping the girls' trips or girls' night out. I know you guys are going to tell me all your stories in the comments, and I'm so glad that you do, because then you can read each other's and go, oh, hey, I'm not the only one. No, you're not. Why would they be Why? They were warning. They were like, these are types. This is the nature of some people, and you must beware. Goodness gracious. Now the queen thought that she had gotten rid of all her stepchildren and returned home. So the maiden who had remained in her room was saved. The next day, the king went to the castle in the forest, and she told him what had happened and showed him the swan feathers that had fallen down from her 6 brothers into the courtyard. The king was horrified, but couldn't believe that the queen had done such an evil deed. At the same time, he was worried that the princess might also be stolen away from him. So he wanted to take her with him. However, she was afraid of her stepmother and begged the king to allow her to spend one more night in the castle. Then, during the night, she fled and went deeper into the forest. So, we have 6 sons, and they were turned into swans because they all ran outside. Daughter stayed back, and she is now still afraid that the stepmother is going to come and do something. Smart girl, and so she's run deeper into the forest. We've got woman versus woman now. Good woman versus witchy woman. She walked the entire day, and toward evening she came to a hut. Once she entered, she found a room with 6 small beds. Since she was now tired, she lay herself down beneath one of the beds and wanted to spend the night there. Yet at sunset, 6 swans came flying through the window, landed on the floor, and blew on one another until all their feathers were blown off as if some cloth had slipped off of them, and there stood her 6 brothers. She called out from beneath the bed, and the brothers were both glad and distressed to see her again. This one is so good. So good. Okay. You can't stay here, they said. This is a robber's den. When they come home from their marauding, they live here. We can take off our swan skins for only a quarter of an hour every evening and assume our human form during this time. Then it's all over. If you want to rescue us, you must sew 6 little shirts made out of asters. But during this time, you're not allowed to speak or laugh. Otherwise, all your work will be for naught. So she's got to work, and she's got to be quiet while she does it. I know a lot of you are laughing right now, like, huh? Okay. After she had been there for some time, the king who owned this land went hunting and came to the tree where the maiden was perched. Oh, whoops. I'm sorry. I skipped something. I'm too excited. Okay. As the brothers were speaking, the quarter of an hour expired, and once again they were transformed into swans. The next morning, however, the maiden gathered asters, perched herself on a branch of a tall tree, and began to sew. She didn't speak a single word or laugh. She just sat there and concentrated on her work. So this is a woman making a sacrifice. It's not huge, but the woman is making a sacrifice to save these men from the bad one. That's interesting. I've often said that in order to combat, I'm trying to say this so it's, a little bit YouTube friendly. I think the Happy Wife School said it really well. That's a channel that I do watch, and I think she does a really good job with what she does, and she speaks a lot of truth. And she often says that, for her personal story, she realized she was the problem, so she needed to fix it. She's also said that basically the good women need to fix the bad ones. We are the issue, and men are not listened to. Men are viewed as the oppressor. So they've been silenced, really. They've been silenced. They don't like me saying it, but I can say it, and I should say it. I'm trying to hold them accountable and undo some of the things that have been done. I can't do it on a macro level, but I can wake some men up, and I can wake up as many women as possible and fight the battle against the witches. Okay. The next morning, however, the maiden gathered asters, perched herself on a branch of a tall tree, and began to sew. She didn't speak a single word or laugh. She just sat there and concentrated on her work. After she had been there for some time, the king who owned this land went hunting and came to a tree where the maiden was perched. His hunters called to her and told her to come down. But because she was not permitted to answer them, she wanted to satisfy them by throwing them presents. So she threw them her golden necklace. Yet they continued to call out. So she gave her golden necklace. Sacrifice. Not a huge one, but it's the principle of the matter, and it's the gesture. So I would say that's the lesson. that you are trying to teach the little girls. And I'm a big believer that you got to get this information in the little girls before they're 6 years old. Yet they continued to call out, so she threw them her girdle. And when this didn't work either, she threw them down her garters, and little by little, everything that she had on and could do without, until she had nothing left but her little shift. Still, all this was not enough for the hunters. They climbed the tree, carried her down, and led her by force to the king, who was astonished by her beauty. He covered her with his cloak, lifted her onto his horse, and brought her to his home. Even though she was mute, he loved her with all his heart, and she became his wife. So it's a different king. Now the king's mother was angry about all of this and spoke ill of the young queen. Nobody knew where the wench... Wow, okay. Nobody knew where the wench came from. And she wasn't... What is happening? And she wasn't worthy of the king. So it's the women that don't like this woman. When the queen gave birth to her first child, the old mother-in-law took the child away and smeared the queen's mouth with the arterial red fluid while she was asleep. Okay. It's so weird because we just switched to a different king, and now she's the wife. Where are the shirts for her swan brothers? What's going on? And also, somebody who's in our chat frequently by the name Snowy Owls is usually talking about mother-in-laws and how they can be quite witchy. Then she accused the young queen of having eaten her own child and of being a sorceress. However, because of his great love for his wife, the king refused to believe this. Good, because the mother-in-law is just jealous. That's all it is. This queen there's nothing wrong with her. She's beautiful. She's good. All the rest of it. Mother-in-law is just jealous. We have had a stepmother who was jealous of the other king's children. And now we have a mother-in-law who's jealous of this king's wife. Woman versus woman. Man getting basically squished in the middle. Because he's not taking control of the situation. What's the name of this channel again? Oh yeah, Far From Eden. Because what happened in Eden? The man just kind of went along with it. He went along with it. The woman did the one thing she's not supposed to do, and Adam was like, okay, gosh, I guess. And that was a horrible sin. And we have had two kings here not take control of the situation, and they're letting the women run things. And in that, these witches are harming people. Really harming people. And if the men would just stand up and say no, then that wouldn't be happening. Exactly like the Garden of Eden, same lessons. Same lessons. But fairy tales are just silly little stories. Sometime later, the queen gave birth to a second prince, and the godless mother-in-law, godless, see? That was probably, if this made it to another publication, this tale, which I highly doubt, then, because imagine shadow banning fairy tales. They would take that out. But yes, it's bad to be godless. The godless mother-in-law played the same trick and accused the queen of cannibalism again. Since the queen wasn't allowed to talk and had to sit there, she's been mute for years. Sit there mute and work on the 6 little shirts. She couldn't save herself and was sentenced to burn at the stake. This woman is sacrificing, still making these shirts, can't talk, being horribly bullied to soften everything by this evil mother-in-law, and now going to the stake. We have had a story like this before, where there was a mother-in-law sabotaging the woman, and then this happened. And she had to be mute. We have read this kind of a theme, not just a theme, but like this almost exact storyline in another tale. I can't at this moment remember what it was, but I bet you Rojas knows. He's in the chat every night, especially fairy tale night. He's probably going to remember which one it is, because we have not read this one before. The day came when the sentence was to be carried out. It was exactly the last day of the 6 years, and she had managed to finish sewing the 6 shirts. Only the left sleeve of the last shirt was missing. When she was led to the stake, she took the 6 shirts with her, and when she stood on the pile of wood and the fire was about to be lit, she saw the 6 swans flying through the air until they descended right near her. So she threw the shirts over them, and as soon as the shirts touched them, the swan skins fell off, and her 6 brothers stood before her in the flesh. Only the 6th one was missing his left arm. Instead, he had a swan's wing on his shoulder. Now she could speak once again and told everyone how her mother-in-law had slandered her in such a wicked way. Consequently, the old woman was tied to the stake and became a crispy critter. However, the young queen lived with the king and her 6 brothers a long time in great joy. Don't think the father ever saw his kids again. If he'd stood up to wife, he's a king. He doesn't need a queen. It's not like he needs somebody to, cook and clean and all the rest of it. He's a king. So what the heck? I get it. He got out of the forest and he kept his promise, but stand up to evil. That was a witch. Stand up to it. Stand up to your wife. Stand up to your mother-in-law. Stand up to Eve, Adam. Man, that was such a good one, you guys. I have learned so much reading these fairy tales. It is so much easier for me to see the world and understand how disordered we are, how off base we all are, and how much happier we are, being a woman, a real woman, and what we're supposed to be here for. That is where you find your fulfillment, serving your family, having your children, right? Being surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren. You want to think that the women in the past in the West were oppressed? Have you ever seen grandmothers and great-grandmothers with all their grandchildren around them? It's getting less and less, fewer and fewer, because, those women didn't make that choice. So which ones are happy? Which 85-year-olds and 80-year-olds right now are happy and fulfilled? The ones surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The nihilist ones, just, it's sad. It's sad for them because we're being fed lies that fulfillment in your career and how much money you make and all these things that really don't matter. They're not things you think about on your deathbed. They don't matter in the grand scheme of things. They really don't. And so many men are coming to this. It's like I was saying in the beginning. So many men are realizing what is true and seeking it. And that is just a reflection of in whose image they are made. They are going back to truth. They are rejecting evil and seeking truth. And in doing that, They're minimizing themselves. They're minimizing themselves in a tax bracket. They're not, destroying themselves working unless it's some kind of an enrichment. And I don't mean monetarily, but investing in themselves. And so many of them are finding joy in things like nature and creating, like picking up that instrument that they put down years ago because, wifey poo said it was stupid, or you need to be doing something else, or what have you. I want you guys to keep seeking truth unapologetically and calling out witches and standing up to them. But first you have to recognize it, right? You recognize the truth. You stand up to the evil. That's what we're called to do. And it's not an easy thing. It's not. Evil doesn't like to be stood up to. But, in the grand scheme of things, in the end, we win. Because Christ is king. And when you just remember that truth, for me, it gives me strength and confidence. That's where my confidence comes from. That's where my strength comes from. As soon as I start to think it comes from me, then it can leave, right? Then it's contingent upon circumstances and my own capabilities, which, no, highly fallible. I want you guys to have a peaceful Sunday and protect that peace. A day where you feed your soul, especially on Sunday. I love you guys. I'll see you on the next one. This was a great one today. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Bye.